Recording in progress. Okay. We're going to do, I said 11 to 13 or 15, but I'm going to be very surprised if we get all the way to 15. And I forgot to change the time, the length. Remember, I told you guys 4 o'clock and 1 hour. It's going to be 1 hour. And I forgot to change that. So we're going to go to 4. And anyway, setting the stage, once again, it's 1882, and we're approaching Nietzsche with a beginner's mind. We don't know what comes after. We do know, of course, but we are not going to be referring to that. Later philosophers, whatever their comments were, we don't know about. And we don't know the further thinking of Nietzsche down the road. We're just dealing with the gay science. And we've gone through 10 aphorisms, and we're going to start on 11 today. So I think 11 is just an amazing piece of work. And I wanted to quote something. Something came up last week. Somebody presumed, I guess, that Nietzsche and Freud were friends, but they weren't. I'm not sure. I was trying to find out if they even knew each other. Freud knew of Nietzsche.
That only mean this nigga got good dick. This shit probably hitting. This shit probably hitting. City Boys is up. That.
What is with these people, right? I hope he had a good time. I really do. Okay. Freud, however, did read Nietzsche. And one of the things that he said more than once was the degree of introspection achieved by Nietzsche had never been achieved by anyone, nor is it likely ever to be reached again. And he had a more penetrating knowledge of himself than any other man who ever lived or was ever likely to live. That second quote is from Ernest Jones, who was Freud's biographer. And the first quote is from the minutes of the meeting that Freud had with like 20 other people. So Freud was very, very aware of Nietzsche. And I'm not sure that we've been approaching him as a psychologist as well as a philosopher, but I think that would be good to keep in mind. And aphorism 11, so that we don't get into a lengthy discussion about consciousness, what we think it is, I think that for Nietzsche's purposes and ours, this is in the Cambridge translation, she highlights this being in a state of awareness of. That's consciousness. That's the consciousness that Nietzsche is dealing with. And he's claiming that consciousness is more of the veneer, that consciousness isn't even developed yet. It's the newest addition to an organism, and it's dangerous at the moment. And it has not matured, and it's held in place by the instincts of preservation. So what do you guys think about that? Nothing? Nobody thinks anything of that? Really?
I do think something about it. I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm on. Yeah.
Oh, what? You want to be after James? James raised his hand. Can you raise your virtual hand?
Yeah, well, that's I'm on mobile and I don't know how to. I'm just saying I have something to say. I'll go after James, but I just have to figure out how to raise my hand. My bad.
Okay, I can tell you. Tap your phone once, and the controls will pop up, and then you can just look for raise hand on the controls. James.
All right, thank you. Yeah, this is not my favorite. This, to me, he seems to have two kind of attitudes here. One is that errors are a problem with consciousness, and then and then Consciousness gives rise to countless errors that lead an animal or man to perish sooner than necessary, exceeding destiny, as Homer puts it. But then, and at the end, he says, the last thing he says is that um, um, so far, it is a task we've seen only by those who have comprehended that so far we have incorporated only our errors. That's our accomplishment, and that all our consciousness relates to errors. So obviously, error is human. There's a certain amount of truth there. It's a half truth, right? And I guess the problem here is a kind of like a conservatism. That everything is misjudgments and fantasies, and and this detracts even from what is abiding, eternal, ultimate, and most original in man. So it's like the idea is like extremely one-sided. And what's the good guy? Where's the good? The good is in instinct. The good is in whatever becomes permanent in our minds. So what emerges as kind of instinctive, or we already know that, incorporating knowledge so that it becomes instinctive. Instinctive knowledge becomes good knowledge, and anything that you just sort of like figured out or had to work at to be able to think about or talk about, that would be subject to error and something you can't trust. So this is a kind of conservatism. I'm not saying that it's ridiculous, but it's definitely very wrongly put here. He calls it the conserving association of the instincts. Yeah. If they were not so much more powerful, very much more powerful, and if it did not serve on the whole as a regulator, humanity would have to perish. So this is a strong judgment by Nietzsche, definitely in the wrong direction. I think this misguided, strongly put misjudgment.
Okay, my own assessment, which I will elaborate on even more a little bit later, is that this is a brilliant piece of analysis. James K.
Yeah, thanks. So we're allowed to refer back to his previous work, The Birth of Tragedy. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So, he lays it out right in that book, Birth of Tragedy, that there are two dimensions to human beings, human life. We're part of nature, At the same time, we also have this consciousness that is able to rely on rationality, imagination, and that's the Apollonian. I think for him, the Apollonian is what he's referring to as consciousness. Did you want to interject, Lindsay?
I just wanted to stick the definition that he is dealing with, the literal translation of the German, is being in a state of awareness of.
Right.
Imagination is not included in that.
Right. The state of awareness of it is also something that is inherent to human beings that take them out of their realm of instincts. The animals, other creatures, do not have this kind of self-awareness as much as we do. So it's a late development in our species, that it is a kind of awareness that also is prone to error, gets us into trouble. And I think that's what the Apollonian for him represents. And that's why The Birth of Tragedy is kind of a lesson about how the Apollonian ultimately is a kind of this heroic character who believes in his ego, in his self-awareness, in his consciousness, and thinks that is the be-all of existence. but it's not true. He's saying that's an error, and that we are really part of the larger realm of the Dionysian, the life, the natural life,
Yeah, I
force.
think you're a little too far afield for
Mhm.
what he's saying in this.
Right.
I don't think you're going to find that in here. He's just commenting on consciousness is overrated, way overrated.
Exactly how I interpret the birth of tragedy.
Okay,
That the rating of the whole lesson of the birth of tragedy is that the Apollonian hero is overrating his consciousness, the Apollonian side of himself, until he discovers that there's this that Dionysian part, his natural instincts, instinctive self, that he doesn't realize until he experiences this tragedy. So anyway, that's how I interpret what he means by the errors of consciousness, as opposed to the instincts.
okay, Luke.
Yeah, so I found this, like you, Lindsay, a very interesting passage, and much of what was just said by the people who just spoke, I actually disagree with a lot of what they said. But I'm going to try to, and what I was initially going to say, hopefully that kind of demonstrates my position on the matter. I think it's important in this passage that he says that consciousness is a function, right? And not only is it a function, it is a new function. And as a new function, it produces errors. But consciousness itself is not necessarily an error. Consciousness is, like anything that arises over the course of human development, needs to be tried, tested, and essentially sharpened. And I think actually the last passage, or the last aphorism 10, where he talks actually about the how great men are atavistic in a way, and part of what makes part of that passage in aphorism 10, it seems to kind of imply. I'll pull up the book real quick. That what makes, in any case, he says, and cultivates them against another world that resists them until he becomes either a great human being or a mad and eccentric one. So these two aphorisms seem actually pretty distinct, but in some way, in aphorism number 2, part of what makes the atavistic man the great man is that the world resists him, and that these old instincts that come to rise have been tested and proved over the course of human history. And this is actually a kind of a good analogy to look at consciousness, because consciousness is the opposite. Now, it doesn't mean it's an error itself. It only means that it is a relatively new instinct that has not progressed far enough. But I don't believe that looking at this through the Apollonian or Dionysian dichotomy is particularly helpful. And I also don't think that looking at it through any kind of dichotomy, especially the unconscious conscious dichotomy, is useful either, because it seems pretty clear in this passage that what consciousness, it's not like the conscious and the unconscious are two different states of awareness. Conscious is the only possibility of a state of awareness, and it's almost like consciousness itself is enveloped by the unconscious, and that actually comparing the two or setting up any kind of model that sees the two in a kind of dialectic or dichotomous way inevitably fails, because consciousness is purely functional.
Okay, one of the things that I got out of this, I thought about this a lot yesterday. I'll get to you, Quan, in a minute, and Jason and Fred, is that instincts and drives of which we are not aware are primary in our behavior. And because we are aware of what we're doing, we think we are making decisions a lot of times when we're really not making any decisions at all. We just are aware that we're doing something, and the consciousness that we have, as primitive as it is, assumes that we're doing something that we are driving by having it in our thoughts, when actually the movement or the desire or the urge came first, and consciousness is an excuse that we dream up as we're aware of it. Quan.
I think that this paragraph is absolutely awesome and outstanding, and I would like to read 3 lines before giving my own comment from the paragraph. Quote, "This ridiculous overestimation and misapprehension of consciousness has the very useful consequence that an all too rapid development of consciousness was prevented." And here, I absolutely agree with the former speaker that consciousness is the latest function that we receive from nature, and that before, for the control or the operation, if I may use the word operation, of the body and of the mind, we have reflexes, we have instinct, we have automatisms, and those stuff are not needed to be lived at the conscious level, very precisely, okay? And that is what I learned at the medical school, that the life of the mind has 4 layers: instinct, reflex, instinct, automatism, and consciousness. And because it is the latest gift of nature, if you want, we as a species did not have enough time to be used to it. Okay, a little bit if you were driving an ordinary car and you pass to a Lamborghini. Okay, so the Lamborghini is much more complex, and you would have to learn how to drive a Lamborghini and not an ordinary car. So consciousness, for to push the metaphor, is like that we have a body like we get a new Lamborghini, if you want. And that is precisely the problem. I would like to mention a little bit a pedantic point. In the text, consciousness, the German word is Bewusstheit. I was curious enough to go on the internet to check what is Bewusstheit is. And according to internet, being aware is not Bewusstheit, but Bewusstsein. And Bewusstheit would be rather the meditation or the psychotherapeutic techniques that would help you to be conscious. But that is a small pedantic detail. Maybe at the time of Nietzsche, it was Bewusstheit that had the meaning of Bewusstsein. Since I don't speak German, I cannot go further with that.
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
Okay. So what I also want to say is that I want to read the last 5 lines that I think are interesting. The task of assimilating knowledge and making it instinctive is still quite new. Okay, the task of assimilating knowledge. And here, once again, when you see things or when you observe things in nature or in interaction with other people, what is lived at the level of consciousness is not necessarily accumulated in the memory in a skillful way. Okay, that is why there is a task of assimilating knowledge, and it is still quite new because of that latest function that nature granted us. So it is only the beginning to dawn on the human eye and is yet barely discernible. It is a task seen only by those who have understood that so far we have incorporated only our errors and that all of our consciousness refers to errors. So there is a process of learning and of assimilating that we as a species is at the beginning of the process. I stop here.
Yeah, at the beginning of conscious awareness of what we are doing instinctively. Jason.
I think here consciousness probably a popular concept during the time because Hegel, okay, phenomenology of the spirit, he talk about sensation, perception, understanding. The next is consciousness, and then self-consciousness. And after Hegel, Feuerbach, okay, also talk about the species being, which distinguishes the human being is different because the human being have the consciousness of the entire human. So here based on, I think, Audrey's suggestion, when you read, he just express it. So I think he just talk about, this one may make a lot of mistake. How about instinct, right? So since he probably doesn't know Freud, at least if even he know Freud is very young. So the unconsciousness haven't developed yet. So I think he kind of like talking about the big subject during that time, and he say, oh, it's probably not that important, So that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go by that. Fred. Fred.
Okay, yeah. I think he makes a good point here in that this seems to anticipate Freud in that what he refers to as the instinct comes close to the unconscious, and that this is Nietzsche's usual approach of turning what we consider the lessons of the Enlightenment and rationalism upside down in a way, and that conventionally we would think of consciousness as one that regulates instinctive behavior. But this reverses that and says that the instinctual behavior regulates consciousness. So it's an interesting observation. As usual, he overstates his case, and he's given to extreme exaggeration and kind of excitement, agitation. That's one thing we look for in Nietzsche. It makes it interesting to read that he's passionate about his beliefs, but the drawback is that we always have to step back and say, well, that's emotionally put. Let's put it in context, and maybe there's a kernel of truth in here, but you have to discount the hyperbole, as indicated, for example, that it's what's with all the exclamation points. This is exclamation marks throughout the passage in the German as well, which is odd. And so he overstates the case that so far we have incorporated only our errors. All of our consciousness refers to errors. Way overstates the case. Our behavior is determined by lots of things, by consciousness, that is, by rational decision making, by instinctual behavior, by tradition, by coercion, by social pressure, on and on, all sorts of. But he wants to focus here, which makes it convenient because it captures it in a short little paragraph, but also somewhat weakens the import of it. It's just, that's the way Nietzsche is. You just kind of have to take the good with the bad. It's very over passionate and over argued, I think. And as far as what occurs latest, that's kind of silly. Whether consciousness arose evolutionarily roughly at the same time as bipedalism, and we don't think of that we should cherish regulators on bipedalism like it's a good thing that babies crawl on 4 legs first or something. That's just kind of silly that we would discount bipedalism because it occurs relatively later in our evolutionary history. So, as usual with almost all these passages, I would reiterate, although I don't want to get into another long drawn out discussion on this, I'd reiterate that when he appeals to evolution, he's almost always wrong. But that aside, it's a useful sort of proto-Freudian reminder that there's more to us than our much cherished consciousness. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, before I get to James K., James Cook, and Luke, this is where I went with this. I think that almost everything that I wind up doing is driven, and I think this is what Nietzsche is effectively saying, by some instinct or drive that I am unaware of as a driver. And the example that I think makes the most sense is I am driven to do what I'm doing right now by some drive or instinct or something that is part of me that makes me want to interject my piece of wisdom right now. I'm not consciously going, I'm going to interject and say something right now. I'm just doing it. Also, and I really would like all of you to sort of think about this. The words that I'm using to express this thought are not thought out beforehand. Consciousness has nothing to do with the language I'm speaking right now. It is coming from some unknown place inside of me. And that's what I think he's getting at. Consciousness is, for a lot of people, you're aware that you're talking. And so you presume that you are making those words come out exactly the way you want them to. But if you think about it, just go talk to yourself for a while. Maybe you'll feel differently, but if you really take a look at it, that's just one example. You talk about Friedrich Nietzsche making choices. Who is making the choice? Where is the choice being made? The choice is being made, I think Nietzsche is saying, by an instinct or a drive of which you are unaware until the choice is made. And then you become aware of it and claim it as your own. James K.
Yeah, so you're saying that this unawareness of your choices, right, is coming out of the unconscious, right? The instincts are part of the unconscious.
We can, I guess it's okay to use the word unconscious. That came along with Freud, I think, more than, but that's what he's referring to, are these drives and instincts and things that are built into us that drive us to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my point is that there's an, consciousness just doesn't come out of nowhere, right? It's an interaction between the instinct, the unconscious and something else, right? Which is the, I think what he's talking about is a kind of a social collective relationship. And I think that's what he means by that passage where he talks about the tyranny of the unconscious, or let's see. It constitutes a danger to the organism, right? He's referring to consciousness. It is a good thing for it to be properly tyrannized in the meantime. Thus, consciousness is properly tyrannized, and not the least by one's pride in it. So there's a kind of, I think there's a kind of otherness there that the consciousness developed by this kind of otherness, the social construct that is involved in the development of consciousness. It's a social construct in conflict with the instincts, with the unconscious. And there's a tyranny coming from the social sphere, the superego, using Freudian terms.
Okay, let's not, we don't know Freud. We don't know Freud. I'm sorry I even brought it up. I did bring it up earlier, but let's not get all Freudian here.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I'm just, use it as a model for what he's talking about here. So that the tyranny is coming from the social construct. And it's going back to the Dionysian and Apollonian. It is exactly the relationship between a Dionysian and Apollonian, that they have to somehow find some kind of a balance with each other, or if one oversteps, it will, find itself collapsing into the other. And so I think that's what my point is, that the consciousness is developing, comes about by interaction between these forces of the unconscious and the social sphere, the tyranny of the social.
I don't think he says that here. I think the tyranny is internal. It's not external.
Internal. What is it? In where you say the internal, where the instincts?
Yes, your own personal instincts. Yes, not the social ones around you, the ones you have.
So you're saying that instincts are tyrannizing over itself, or what?
No, they're tyrannizing over consciousness. Consciousness is not an instinct. It's a function, as we've observed.
Exactly, right. Is that he's talking about the consciousness here. Consciousness, or rather, without instincts, humanity would long have ceased to exist, right? Without instincts. And so the function of consciousness, of the tyranny, is to find some kind of balance, between the instincts and the social functions, the social sphere.
Okay, I don't think he says anything about the social sphere at all.
No. I mean, I'm reading into what he means by the tyranny. The tyranny by what? Tyranny by some other.
The instincts of preservation. He
Right.
says that's exactly what he said.
If you think about consciousness itself, in your, just like your personal consciousness, would you have a consciousness if you develop without others? You have to have others in order for you to develop consciousness. If you didn't relate with others, you would not develop that sense of consciousness, I would think.
Okay. All right.
Like just like Robinson Crusoe, stranded on the island, right? He eventually has to use a ball to put a face on it, to kind of be able to talk to it, to have a sense of consciousness that he is, that he is who he is.
He has to be aware. I think what Nietzsche is saying is that consciousness is the observer of the drives and the instincts. I'm not going to use the word unconscious. That's a Freudian expression.
Right.
And I think it's going to stick with.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you that consciousness is the observer, but how does the observer come about being an observer? By its relationship with other.
It's a development that is evolutionary. Fred will disagree with that probably.
Right.
But that is what he's asserting. It's the latest development of the organic. Isn't that what he says? Conscious last development of the organic. It's something that just appears. It's just there. We, on the other hand, think it's a lot more than that. James Cook.
Wow. Okay. So it's not just there, it's the development. I just want to talk about the like arguments, right? Because it's been mentioned, right? People have their own idea about the origin of consciousness, what consciousness is to them, what instinct is.
All errors. Go ahead.
Well, maybe I'm not casting blame. So what I went on to say, is that a couple of things that make me think about this, that I think about because of this. are one is like is because of I do experiment, a psychotherapeutic experiment, watching body cam videos from police. They're available on
Whatever.
local on the local news. You know, I live in Las Vegas, and also you can watch them from other precincts on YouTube. So, but these are really interesting because a lot of them have to do with people's resistance, either when they're on alcohol or just in general, a tendency to not not want to cooperate much, right? And to sort of like put up a lot of resistance. And then what you see is a lot of the time is a goodwill police officer try to break the pattern of resistance and find out if an arrest is not necessary, right? In other words, yeah. So the conscious, but I just wanted to point out that what I see happening is the person here. Well, just Lindsay, let me make my point, okay?
No. Let's keep the focus on number 10. That's what we're talking about. So go ahead. Oh, did you mute it? How did that happen?
Thank you.
I didn't.
I don't know. So anyway, yeah, so that's all. I just wanted to simply give my own opinion on instinct, that this happens because of instincts. People's instincts are overriding the possibility of like making conscious decisions. And that's what I see. That's my own psychotherapeutic interpretation of these negative actions that people take, sometimes when they're being interrogated or they're being commanded, you know, things like that. Now, the other side of it is working. So like when we see ourselves working, we are conscious of the fact that we are working instinctually. And often it's the instinctive part of us that causes us to work well. In other words, if you're a writer, you keeping your fingers on the keypad, always finishing the job. If you're a worker, you know, not taking too many breaks, but making sure that your work remains accurate and your awareness is on what you need to be aware of. If you're at a height and avoid falling, or if you're working with material that is difficult to work with, you know the kinds of instincts that you need to rely on. So there is a place for instinct in human work, and so I'm not saying that. But the idea that the consciousness in this case doesn't necessarily produce errors because it is allied with instinct. In other words, we can be conscious of the fact that we are working instinctually and conscious of the fact that we need to be a little bit repetitious, but we also need to make judgments from time to time, and we need to be conscious of when those judgments have to be made. So I'm just making a strong argument, you know, contra Nietzsche here, that the consciousness is just a partner of instinct and has to be employed even when the instinct is principal. In other words, in periods where we're doing work, or even those periods like if we're in trouble and we're resisting, and we resist instinctually, but we need to be conscious of ourselves so that we know when resistance is called for and when we should not have to resist.
Okay.
Now that's all out of my head. I understand your objection, Lindsay, but this is all out of Nietzsche's head, and your arguments were out of your head. So that's why I gave them.
Yeah, but I think my arguments are coming from Nietzsche's writing, and that's the difference. I think that Nietzsche is right here.
And I think Nietzsche is wrong here. And I very strongly believe that he's wrong here. And I think there's some other places where we can expose him.
No, he's not 1,000% right. I totally agree with that. But I just spend some time doing a little experiment that I asked you earlier. Try to figure out where the words are coming from, because consciousness has nothing to do with them. Luke.
Yeah, so I actually agree with James, what James just said. I just think that Nietzsche would probably agree with him as well. I've always taken Nietzsche to be something of a pluralist, which is that, you know, as human beings, what we have is like a collection of different drives, and the rule for how those drives assert themselves is essentially the rule of tyranny. Every single drive is trying to conquer the other drives. And naturally, the result of this is that over the course of human history, over the course of natural history, these drives figure out ways to cooperate and work together. And I think that's how consciousness emerges, is it's almost like this mediating force of the plurality of drives. So it's yet another function that regulates and legislates the conflict of drives. And as a function, it obviously does not have like a moral value like it would for Kant and the rationalists and other philosophers, but rather consciousness, like an example would be, say, like an athlete, right? So like an athlete probably wants to do a lot of other things than practice their sport, but consciously they're aware of the benefits that practicing that sport gives them. But what they do in that practice, when they practice that sport, what they do when they consciously engage with this activity, is they actually strengthen their instincts and they develop something like self-discipline. So I think what James is saying about consciousness being an ally of the instincts, that's what consciousness is supposed to be. The problem with that is, like any function, especially a new function, I mean, a very easy analogy here would be a state, right? What does a state do? Well, a state mediates, it mediates between a bunch of individual parties who essentially want to dominate one another, and they come together to cooperate in some way. But the state, even though that's supposed to be its function, the state can also produce errors. And in fact, every state that has ever existed is imperfect to some degree, and that's essentially what consciousness is. And just like just like the kind of states we have today probably would not have worked 2,000 years ago, the same thing is with consciousness, which is that it takes time for consciousness to build up its ability to regulate these instincts and drives. And there are, of course, errors in that process. You know, consciousness is not a perfect entity. But I think what James is right, but it's also kind of in line with what Nietzsche is saying.
Okay, I'm going to quote something here, which is in the very first paragraph. It's the third sentence, because I think you've got it wrong. If the conserving association of the instincts were not so very much more powerful, and if that conserving association did not serve on the whole as a regulator. What he's saying is that the instincts, the conserving instincts, they're the regulator, not consciousness. Consciousness is the observer of what those things, how those things manifest themselves in your action. And then you make the decision, oh, I decided to do that. But you don't know how you decided to do that. You will make up an excuse for why you're doing what you do. That's what I think he's saying here. Quan.
Wait, then why would consciousness emerge if it has no possible use?
Not even going there. Not even going there. That's outside of what we're talking about here. Quan.
Okay, so I think it's an awesome discussion. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And I want to say that the example with language is excellent, okay? Because we all learn and articulate language when we were babies and children. And that learning has been most of the time an imitation of the grown up of our family and of societies. So the learning of a language is called in medicine or in physiology, if you prefer, a learning at the level of automaticity, okay, which is the level just under consciousness. When you said that if we have to take a decision, and it's another excellent example, because what I want to stress, and I think it's come from the paragraph, and I want to stress the fact that Nietzsche is truly someone who is in advance in, because many of the things that is in this paragraph has been confirmed by modern neurophysiology. Consciousness is truly a function that is unique compared to everything else that we can call collectively as memory. What is memory by fundamental definition? Memory by fundamental definition is the capacity to repeat a performance. For example, when I eat something, my digestive system will proceed to a number of operations to digest that something, okay? And that process of digestion is a memory that is inbuilt in my body. The fact that I learned a certain language when I was a child was also a memory that has been built not instinctively or reflexively in my body, but rather require and learning by imitation. But after that learning by imitation, it became another kind of memory. The fact that I speak English with a certain accent is a kind of memory too, because English is my fifth language. So I don't speak English with an American accent or with a British accent, because I did not learn English when I was 1 year old, but when I was 10 years old. So that is a memory. So instinct, reflexes, automatism, all those three groups of stuff, of operations in the mind body, are collectively known as memories as opposed to consciousness. And consciousness precisely is the capacity to be aware of certain memory. Certain memory are completely silenced when it is healthy. Okay, for example, the process of digestion is completely silenced. There's a famous definition of disease that when the body is no longer silent, okay, when it is expressed itself by pain or some malaise. But some memories are not silenced. For example, our souvenirs, certain images, etc. And consciousness is precisely that inner light that makes you capable of being aware of what is happening within your body mind. And that is precisely maybe the two German words that I mentioned 10 minutes ago, Bewusstheit and Bewusstsein. Bewusstsein is the state of being aware, and Bewusstheit is precisely the process that by which you learn to be aware of the three types of memory that you have, the reflexes, the instincts, and the automaticity or the automatism, which language is part of. And I finish by reading just one line from his stuff. Before a function is fully developed and mature, it constitutes a danger to the organism. And it's right that most of the time we function by the three layers of reflexes, instinct, and automatism. It's very rare that we function entirely on the consciousness level. And it is maybe the interesting adventure that is opening for our species. I stop here.
I think what Nietzsche is saying is that because of the association of conserving instincts, we never function on the level of consciousness running the show. Audrey.
For now, we don't know in 1,000 years.
Juan, we're moving on. Audrey.
Well, you can keep moving on, because this, I mean, it's a very interesting conversation, but I mean, I think that instincts here is throwing us off. I think the way that Quan is talking about memory makes more sense here. Um, and what Luke was saying also makes sense in terms of the plurality. Although in this section and in section 10, I don't see that, but later on you see that, so we can't talk about it. But
Right.
but the plurality, I think, is definitely here. But the idea of instinct is it's used here, I think, incorrectly, or that we think of instinct as, you know, something just biological. I mean, Lindsay, when you were giving your example, you know, there's something in my instinct as if it's already there and it's going to stay that way, and then my consciousness can say something else, but that it really comes from this one place that like almost never changes, which that I could never believe. And so I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think we're trying to pin something down here, like this is exactly what he meant, which I don't think any of us really know. And I wonder, you know, I think his passion is something to also take into consideration. This is a very passionate man who's saying things and saying things that he truly, truly believes. So is what he's saying related at all to his instincts? I don't know. But I do think that what he's saying basically about consciousness is that it's the newest thing that we are dealing with. We're humans, we have consciousness, we found out we have it, and we take such pride in it that it could become a danger until we mature and it develops properly. It's so simple that way. And forget about everybody trying to define what an instinct is or what consciousness is, you know, at this point. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think it's important, since the title of the piece is consciousness, to sort of establish what consciousness is. And that's why I introduced that thing at the beginning, the more literal translation of the German as in the state of being aware of. And then we went off from there. And I thought it's a lot yesterday. That language thing wasn't the only thing that I thought of. I thought of all sorts of things, like, I'm going to make myself a cup of coffee. Well, that came because a drive somewhere inside of me wanted coffee.
Yeah.
And my consciousness became aware of that. It wasn't like I sat and thought, my consciousness did not make me go make a cup of coffee.
Well, you know, that's really interesting because I think that my instinct tells me when I wake up that I want something, and I learned that I want coffee. So I don't, but that's all. You know I learned that coffee is going to satisfy that from practice. You give it to me at 2 years old, I would spit it out. So, you know, I'm just saying these are learned behaviors that we absorb, and that's probably why nobody ever changes, but because we absorb them too much. But I'm not quite sure. I think all he's saying here is that consciousness, being aware, has given us a sense of we've taken it someplace without really understanding it. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. I could go there. I could go there. I think that the essence of what he's saying is consciousness is a vastly overrated faculty. And it'll develop into something down the road, maybe. I don't think he's even certain of that, but he's just trying to point out that consciousness is just not what we think it is. And I think the passion comes from the time that he lived in. It's like the untimely meditations. He didn't feel like he belonged in the time that he lived in. And he's trying to make a point, and he makes it somewhat aggressively. Many times.
That's also a good point, but we'll see what other people have to say about that. But that's a good point. But passion is not always coming from a place of suffering, too. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. James Cook.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say for Quan, the topic, when he announces the topic, Nietzsche uses Bewusstsein, and there's one other place where he uses that spelling, when the ridiculous overestimation and misunderstanding of consciousness, that's Bewusstsein. And then at the end of that sentence, he returns back to Bewusstheit. And so most of the references are Bewusstheit, and at the beginning and in that one sentence, he does use Bewusstsein. So they're interchangeable a little bit. The spellings are interchangeable. They're both nouns used as nouns. Yeah.
And it's also it's also in the notes right under it.
Yeah, it's in the footnote in the Cambridge edition, right? The I would rather not get into wrangling over the German. Okay, I did this last week too. We're reading English translations. Let's just deal with that. Most of us don't know German or whatever else language might be used. And so we're just sitting here kind of going like, who cares about this stuff? All right, Quan, last word.
I would like to take again your example of when you wake up, you want a coffee. Okay, it was a drive that pushed you wanting that coffee. I agree, and you are aware of the fact that you want a coffee. But I would like to say that consciousness can be used in a practical manner in our life. Okay, suppose you suffer from a disease that it's not good for you to take a coffee. Okay, so you have a drive to take a coffee, but at the same time, you have the memory that you have a disease that it's better for you not to take a coffee. So you might take the conscious decision because you want to preserve your health, not to take the coffee. Okay, so I think that consciousness can be very down to earth in our daily life.
Well, maybe that decision is driven by the conserving association of instincts and not consciousness. That's what I'm getting at. Okay, we're going to wrap it up for today. I'm sorry I said, I know, an hour and a half, but I did say last week, I just forgot to change that part on the meetup page. And I just want to offer the little thing over me one more time. Probably I'll do it 30 or 40 more times. A very popular error, having the courage of one's convictions. Rather, courage is having the strength for an attack on one's convictions. And I wrestled with this consciousness thing all day yesterday to test myself. How do I really feel about this notion? And I think, completely in the ballpark where Nietzsche is speaking in this. I thought about it a lot. I challenged almost everything I felt about how I drive myself. And I invite you to do that too. I really do, because we're going to move on. But I think this is going to be a very important aphorism down the road. Your first instinct is probably not something to pay attention to, or at least it's something worth examining and challenging and just see what happens. I think that's a large part of what Nietzsche is really trying to do, was inspire reflective thought, whatever that is. All right.
Would that not be a form of consciousness, the reflective thought?
Beats me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose you could say that, reflective thought. It might be, to keep in the vein I was at earlier, a drive that wants me to test myself. It's something that is part of who I am to do that. And I'm just watching myself do it and trying to claim that I am the one responsible. Anyway.
It's 4:03. Can you just wait a second before you leave? I want to say.
I can wait longer than that.
Well, you don't have to. The reading the last one, the task of assimilating knowledge and making it instinctive is still quite new. It is only beginning to dawn on the human eye, and it is yet barely discernible. It is a task seen only by those who have understood that so far we have incorporated only our errors. Well, forget the last part, that last, I can't speak to the word errors because it's a shocking sort of word in that sentence. And it probably means something that I don't quite get yet. But the whole idea seems to be, when he's using the term instincts, he's talking about assimilated knowledge, which then becomes the memory that Kwam was talking about before. And so it's not instinct like the first thing you want to do is get something. Like, you know, you are thirsty. There's a biological need to eat to keep the organism alive. I don't think we're talking about that, but I will practice what you're saying, Lindsay. I'm going to practice it.
Okay. You're making a really good point, because I didn't know what to make of that last sentence. I really got confused at that part, and I figured out some errors, but then I already forgot what it was that I had figured out yesterday. But you're right. That may be how maybe reflective thought is a kind of enhanced fundamental consciousness. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Lindsay, can I ask you a logistical question? So we're going to switch here next week to 1 hour. Is that right?
Yeah, what's gonna happen? We're gonna do. I have a thing tonight. I have another thing tonight, but I'm gonna try to make sure I don't have this anymore. So what's gonna happen is on alternate weeks, it's only gonna be an hour, and the other alternate weeks, it's gonna be an hour and a half. And I will make sure that I put that correctly on the webpage.
Well, that's tricky to do in Meetup, so good luck with that. But
well, yeah, I know.
Or you want to like make it a half hour earlier, something like this?
No way.
Okay,
no.
so
This was a lot of fun. I really had a good time again. What, Fred?
would it be okay? Should we make it 2 hours every other week?
No, I can't. No, I'm not going to do it every other week. I'm going to do it every week. But 1 week it's going to be 1 hour long, like
Right.
next, and the week after that, it'll be an hour and a half. So that's going to all an hour, hour and a half, an hour, hour and a half, hour and a half. That's how we're going to do it.
Shouldn't be an hour, 2 hours, 1 hour, 2 hours.
I can't do the 2 hour thing. I can't.
Okay, I ran the numbers on this, and at the current pace, we should wrap this up in January of 2009.
That was an instinct and a drive at work, Brad.
Fred, you can connect the half hour that, you know, we're free, you know, every other week. Let your instincts drive you.
Yeah, right.
Just
That's scary. You don't want to see my instincts drive me.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Lindsay. Bye.
Okay, yeah, you bet. All right, I'll see you guys for 1 hour next week, and then we'll put this thing in motion. All right, bye.
Take a shot.